whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
This is something that happened to me just a couple of months ago. I love Facebook. I love memes. I love talking to new people, and I love long comment sections. That being said, I never give away personal information such as where I work or live, my birthday info is private, and so on. I've made quite a few friends that I don't know personally, but agree with or have had really good conversations with. So, after commenting back and forth on a friend's post for a while, it was no surprise to me when Tyler messaged me. It started off fairly simple. We just talked about the post we commented on, and how are you doing, and common interests. I was excited to have a new friend, and he seemed pretty interesting, because we did have a lot in common. I'm not a beauty queen or anything, but I let him know after about an hour of casual conversation that I was happily taken. I enjoyed his friendship, but it wouldn't lead to anything more since I'm going to get married next year. He seemed a little upset, but he was still respectful, so great. I told him goodnight and went to sleep and thought nothing of it. The conversation continued for a few days, and he started to get a little pushy if I didn't respond immediately. And I told him that I was very busy, so I might not always answer right away. Then he apologized and told me that he was just bored and lonely. I started to put a little distance between us because he didn't really back down. But I didn't want to completely give up my new friendship because I hated the fact that he was so lonely. One day, he randomly messaged me saying that he wanted to have me in his arms. I immediately nipped that in the bud, reminding him of my relationship and telling him that if he didn't stop, then our friendship would be done because I respect and am loyal to my fiancée above anyone else. He immediately lost his shit, messaging me saying he didn't care about my fiancé and making threats towards him, etc. I stopped messaging and selected to put his messages on ignore. He could still message me, but it wouldn't go to my inbox. I made a post about it, and a friend of mine commented and said he had done the same thing to her, except he knew where she lived and would show up outside her house. I freaked out and went to see if there were any more messages from him, because she told me he was bad news, and I should call the police if any threats were being made. This is where the shitstorm really begins. He had messaged me over a dozen times. Different things. Started off kind of taunting me for not answering, then moved on to him messaging me about some asshole who cut him off or was driving too slow for his tastes. Then to him saying he was going to shoot the guy and it would be my fault because I made him so angry by ignoring him. I messaged him back telling him to leave me the hell alone and stop replying for a while. He started messaging me, narrowing down on where I lived. That really freaked me out, as I had never told him where I lived, or anything even remotely close to my house. The only thing I had ever said was that I'd talk to him later because I was going to Arby's to get some food and my phone was dying. Yet he somehow knew I was 7 minutes from the Arby's by my house, which is exactly how long it takes to walk there for me, and there are several Arby's in my city. Then he started narrowing down to what street I lived off of, down to knowing a 4-door black sedan was linked to my address, which there was, but not in my name. It was in my sister's name when she registered it as an Uber. That was enough for me, and I called the police on the non-emergency line. The police refused to do anything, of course. They said that until he actually showed up or did something, there was nothing they could do. Never mind that he was sending me pictures of dead people and saying that he was going to be my family and was narrowing down my address. Unless he actually showed up, I was screwed. All I could do was apply for a protective order, so I did. Tyler kept messaging me, so I told him there was a PO in place and he needed to leave me alone. He responded with there was nothing that could be done until he was served and he signed it, which is true. My fiancée is in IT and has a cousin who is pretty tech-savvy as well, and we managed to get the last couple of addresses Tyler had, but the police couldn't find him at either of those. We had license plate numbers, address, full name, birthday, etc., yet he seemed untraceable. We stopped for a while, but the day of my court case to have the PO extended to 2 years, he started again. My fiancée filed criminal charges for the last threat he made, when he wrote, "Someone could come shoot you in 15 minutes." His last known address was exactly a 15-minute drive from my house. I've spent the last couple of months completely afraid. He was arrested and served finally, and I think he was speeding or something. And it turns out he has a history of this. Multiple charges, all dropped or dismissed. He's done it to a couple of my friends who showed up to my court case for the criminal charges. They dropped everything from felonies to a simple misdemeanor disorderly conduct charge, with 12 months suspended jail time depending on his behavior, because they, quote, couldn't prove it was him and not someone else behind the keyboard. It didn't help that I had never seen his face before this court date, even though I had two people who had received messages from him and seen him face to face as well. I can't sleep. The slightest noise wakes me up panicking, and it's been hell for my family. So Tyler, let's not meet. This happened about 10 years ago in Calgary, Alberta. I was 14 or 15 at the time and working the night shift with my mom delivering papers. I was having a lot of unexplainable things happen to me. One place we delivered to was beside an old park that no one played at anymore, and I always saw a little girl on the swing. The first time I saw her, I was really concerned. She looked no more than 4 or 5, and this was at about 2 in the morning. I told my mom, but she said no one was there. But just to make sure, my mom had me stay in the van, and she went to walk through the park. She came back and said she saw no one. Fast forward about a month or so. I'd gotten very used to seeing this girl, sometimes on the swing, sometimes walking around. I wanted to know who she was, so I did a little research on the area and came up with nothing. At first she gave off that innocent, lost girl vibe, so I thought maybe she was a missing kid who met a tragic end. A little more research, this time missing or murdered children from the whole city and the towns around it. But again, I came up with nothing. Slowly, I started feeling uneasy when I saw her. She no longer felt like a child. She felt old, and something was definitely not right. I started getting bad headaches every time I saw her. I started getting sick and very weak as well. And at one point, I was so weak and dizzy, I couldn't stand on my own for almost 2 days. My mom, who was not religious at all, started to get very worried and called a church asking for help. They suggested that we pray and ask God for guidance. In all likelihood, they thought I was a troubled kid making stuff up. Well, that didn't do anything, and things got worse. One night, my headache was so bad that I told my mom she had to take me home. I couldn't see it hurt so bad, and at the time, we lived about a 5-minute drive from the park. So she drove me home, and my brother went to work with her. My sister stayed up to take care of me, a nice cold cloth on my forehead, and she made sure it was dark and quiet, and I finally passed out on the couch, and my sister went upstairs to bed. Dream time. What felt like only a few seconds after I fell asleep, I heard a blood-curdling scream come from my sister's room. I opened my eyes, and all the lights were on, but I didn't care. Screw the headache. I booked it upstairs to my sister's room. Only I wasn't in my sister's room. I was in the van, at the park. Confused, I looked around and saw my sister standing about 10 feet in front of the car. It started pouring rain, so I yelled at her to get inside the van. She came to the passenger side, and she wasn't my sister anymore. She was the little girl on the swing. She smiled, looked me dead in the eyes, and the most evil, sing-songy voice I'd ever heard said, "I found you." And she started giggling. My eyes shot open. I was back on my couch, and the lights were on, so I figured I'd been out for a while. I tried to get up for a drink of water, and I couldn't move. I was in a form of sleep paralysis, and I thought I could hear that evil giggle again. And I started freaking out, trying with all my might to move, to yell, to do anything. About 30 seconds later, which felt a whole lot longer, trust me, my mom came rushing in the door, and I could finally move again. I rolled off the couch and screamed and cried. My mom said that ever since she dropped me off, she had a bad feeling and just needed to make sure that I was okay. It had only been about 20 minutes since she dropped me off. I told her about my vivid dream, and now my mom was convinced something seriously bad was happening. She called one of our good friends who was a Wiccan to see if they could give us some help. I'll call her Jay. Jay said it sounded like something demonic, but not necessarily a demon. She said she would be over within a week, and she lived about a 12-hour drive away. The next night, I was working with my mom again, feeling like crap, but I was too scared to ask to go home again. I'd much rather sleep in the van, which is exactly what I did. Now what happened next, I have no recollection of. My mom said she let me sleep, and she got out, and when she came back, I was sitting up, smiling at her. She asked me why, and I started to giggle. She told me to stop because it wasn't funny, and she said I did stop, and I looked at her, tilted my head, and smiled and said,
"I found her. She's mine now."
And then I started giggling again. Mom freaked out and started yelling my name, and finally I came to and asked her why she was yelling at me. I got another headache, and Mom called Jay and told her what had happened. She hopped on the next flight over. Just called into work. Originally, she was going to finish the work week and then drive over on the weekend. Jay did a blessing and smudged our house and my room. She prayed to her goddesses for protection. She did everything she could think of to protect me. I don't know what it was, but something worked. I haven't seen or heard this little girl since, and I'm very happy about that. To this day, I still don't know exactly what she was. A demon, a ghost, or some other evil spirit.